All right, class. So this is what you should see when you unzip your Cosmos DB example. And you'll notice, first of all, that in the constants here, we've got endpoint URI and primary key, and then the database name and the collection name. Now, these are all from my personal instance. And if you want to take a stab at setting up your own Cosmos Azure instance to use your own repository, then you can do that. But if you don't feel like doing that and you want to use mine instead, which is totally fine, I would recommend that you change the collection name. Because otherwise we're all going to be using the same collection name. So just put your first or last name on the front here and then save it. And that will ensure that you're using your own notes and not somebody else's. All right, so that's the first thing. So let's take a look at the structure of this first of all. So if we look here, we've got a to-do item manager. And that is really what ferries all the requests to create the database, to create a document collection to this intermediary, this document DB service. And that's defined by an iDocument DB service. And what that is using is an interface. So if I open up this iDocument DB service, this is an interface, and it defines a series of methods, the parameters they're expecting, and what they're going to return, right? And then what you have to do is you have to create a class which fulfills that interface, right? And you do that by having this colon and specifying what interface this class is supposed to be defining or filling out. So this is where all the real magic happens, right? The document DB service is where the code, the crux of the code is. And it keeps things like the list of to-do items, right? And if we look into our models, that's where we will see our to-do items, and it looks very similar to what we've been using before, right? We've got these JSON properties at the top, and then these getters and setters for these various strings and a Boolean. So very, very similar. We've seen that before. That shouldn't surprise us. But then when I look into the document DB service, this is all kind of new, right? The first thing you'll notice is that we use a document client, which is the Microsoft Azure Documents client. And in the slides, there's a link to places you can go to look at documentation and whatnot. But this is how it really interacts with the Cosmos Azure online database. The URI here, collection link, is created right off the bat when you first create this. So both the client here, the document client, and the collection link get created when you create an instance of this document DB service. And of course, when we look in here, we define it here, and then we say to-do item manager, and then we're expected to pass an instance of this service. Well, where does that get passed? Well, that will be in our app.xaml.cs file. So basically what we're doing here is we are creating a public static to-do item manager. And again, this is very similar to what we've done before when we've specified our file paths and whatnot. And then that to-do manager gets created when the app gets created. And we pass in a document DB service. So this is how we let the to-do item manager know that this is the specific class that's going to be serving up the functions of this interface that we've got defined. So that's how that works, right? Here we pass in the actual class that fulfills this interface. Hopefully that makes some sense. All right, anyway, so let's take a look here. So we've got this client, and this is the client that we're really going to use for everything, for creating the database, for creating a document collection if it does not exist. So nice names of methods, right? They're very clear on what they mean. Then whenever we need to create a URL, instead of having it specified, we use this URI factory to create the database URL based on the database name that's passed in. And that will almost always be passed in through this database name, whatever's in our constants. And we'll see where that happens later. So the client is what we use, and we just have all these methods here, and they're kind of gone through in the slides in a little more detail. This offer throughput just limits the read and write operations to 400 per second, which is what the limit is on our free account. So that's set up for us. and then we have a get to do items async. And this, remember, everything that's asynchronous has to pass back a task, but the task contains a list of to-do items here. So we have our items that we create when we want to get our list of to-do items. We make it brand new, and then we use this query, client.create document query, and it's going to be of type to-do item. And then this collection link, which we created, remember, up here, right? This collection link based on the database name and the collection name that is defined in our constants. We create this collection, and then we go through it piece by piece, and then we use this items.add range, which adds multiple items at once based on the items that come back from us from that query. So you don't have to understand exactly everything that's going on here. I mean, you should have a pretty good idea because we're going to end up using it and modifying it, right? When we're saving items, we simply have to check whether it's a new item or not. And this interface is not immediately intuitive or apparent. So save to do item async is passed is new item, right? And it defaults to false, by the way. That's important, right? So if we look at where save to do item is used, well, we can guess that it's in our views, right? And specifically when we have our to do item page, there is a save button in there, right? And when we do the save button, that save button, oh yeah, app, to do manager, save to do item async, and then is new item is here, right? Is new item is part of this as a class, and notice that it also defaults to false. It's not a new item. So how does this ever get set to true? Well, if we go to the to-do list page where we actually list our items, we will notice that when we select an item, when we add an item, we create a new to-do item page, and then we pass it true. So to-do item page is one of these pages. We push it to the navigation stack, right? And we pass in true. And when we pass in true, that's where this is new is set. Is new is then true, and then the first time it's true. Otherwise, all other times it's going to default to false if it's not a new item. If it's just an item selected, it just creates that new to-do item without passing in that true. So hopefully that makes some sense. That's when we save. When we delete an item, we just need the ID of the item. And when you look at the ID of the item, how that gets passed is the to-do item manager has an item. It's expecting a to-do item, and then it just takes the ID of that item. So this ID will be automatically generated, right? Because we've got this ID property set here, JSON property, and that will get set by the database when we first create an item. That item ID gets passed in, and then that's how it knows what ID it is when it actually deletes an item. Right there. Well, that's a lot, but what I encourage you to do is to go through this, go through the slides, and really try to soak in how this works and how this passes information around, right? So this interface is defined by this document DB service class. That is set up in the app, right, with the to-do manager. The to-do manager is our controller that kind of goes between, and that's really what supplies all the calls from the XAML CS pages. The other little thing is that there's on the, not the list page, sorry, the item page, there is a toggle, which we've never seen before, which maps to done, the done, which is a Boolean in the to-do items, right? And because it maps to done, it automatically toggles that switch on and off, which you'll see if we run it. Actually, I haven't even run this thing yet. I should run it with you, and then we can take a look at it together, and then we can see it in action. But yes, that's one small difference from the previous notes that we've had. One moment. Debugger's just starting up for me. Here we go. And we are good. Okay, let me just drag that over so you can see it. All right, so we've got our to-do item, we've got our plus, and here we've got actually a name, right, for this note. So this is note 1, wash hands for 20 seconds at least. And then I can save it. And then there's my note 1, wash hands, right? Note 2, wash dishes later. Save. And then I can go back into one of these and I can click done and save, and then there's a little check mark that comes up here, which is also fun. So you can take a look at the interface and how that works. But yeah, basically go through the code, try to follow along how it works, and your job is going to be to modify this a little bit so that yeah, you understand how it works.